The ink on the divorce decree wasn't even dry when Arthur Sterling flashed that infamous, self-satisfied grin. He looked at his wife Samantha across the mahogany table of courtroom 4B and whispered, "I told you you'd leave with nothing but the clothes on your back." He thought the gavel was about to seal his victory, freeing him to enjoy his late father's millions with his mistress. But he didn't see the envelope in Judge Halloway's hand. He didn't know that the dead man had spoken one last time. In seconds, that smirk would vanish, replaced by a horror that would destroy his entire life. This is the story of how a hidden will changed everything. The air inside the Honorable Judge Lawrence P. Halloway's courtroom in downtown Chicago was stale-smelling faintly of floor wax and old paper. It was a fitting atmosphere for the end of a 10-year marriage that had died long before the paperwork was filed. Arthur Sterling sat on the left side of the aisle, adjusting the cuffs of his bespoke Armani suit. He checked his reflection in the polished surface of the table, smoothing back a stray hair. He was 42, handsome in a sharp, predatory way, and currently he was the picture of unbothered confidence. To his right sat his attorney, Richard Thorne, a man whose hourly rate could feed a family of 4 for a month. Opposite them sat Samantha Sterling. At 39, she looked exhausted. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe, messy bun, and her simple grey cardigan seemed threadbare compared to Arthur's silk tie. She sat with her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her knuckles white. She looked small, defeated, exactly how Arthur liked her. "Mr. Sterling," Judge Halloway said, his voice gravelly and impatient. He peered over his spectacles, looking at the papers in front of him. "You understand that by signing this settlement, you are agreeing to the terms of the pre-nuptial agreement, verified in 2014. Ms. Sterling receives the Honda Civic, her personal effects, and a one-time payment of $10,000. You retain the house in Lake Forest, the apartment in the city, all investment portfolios, and the entirety of the Sterling family trust." Arthur picked up the heavy fountain pen, twirling it between his fingers. He looked at Samantha, locking eyes with her. He wanted her to see this. He wanted her to feel the weight of his triumph. "I understand perfectly, Your Honor," Arthur said, his voice smooth. He leaned in, lowering his voice just enough so only the immediate table could hear. "Fair is fair, isn't it, Sam? You did say you didn't marry me for the money. Now you get to prove it." Samantha didn't look up. She just stared at the wooden grain of the table. "Just sign it, Arthur," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please, let's just get this over with." Arthur smirked. That little twist of his lips was his signature. It was the face he made when he closed a hostile takeover, the face he made when he fired an employee, and the face he had made 3 months ago when Samantha found the text messages from a 24-year-old fitness instructor named Isabella. "Don't rush me, darling," Arthur drawled. "I want to savor this." He put the pen to the paper. The scratch of the nib was loud in the silent room. He signed his name with a flourish, Arthur J. Sterling. He pushed the papers toward the center of the table and sat back, crossing his arms. He felt a rush of adrenaline. It was done. The timing was impeccable. His father, the legendary real estate tycoon, Harrison Sterling, had passed away just 7 days ago. The funeral had been a lavish affair, but for Arthur, it was merely a countdown. Harrison had been difficult, old-fashioned, and incredibly stubborn. He had never approved of Arthur's lifestyle, the fast cars, the faster women, the ruthless business tactics that bordered on illegal. But Harrison was traditional, Arthur was his only son. The estate, valued at nearly $80 million, was about to transfer to Arthur free and clear, and because he was divorcing Samantha, now she wouldn't see a dime of that inheritance. It was a masterstroke of legal timing. Richard Thorne leaned over and patted Arthur on the shoulder. "Congratulations, Arthur. You're a free man, and a very, very rich one." "Miss Sterling," the judge addressed Samantha. "Your signature, please." Samantha reached for the pen with a shaking hand. She hesitated for a moment, looking up at the judge. Halloway had been a friend of her father-in-law, Harrison. She remembered Sunday dinners where the two old men would smoke cigars and play chess. Halloway's eyes softened slightly as he looked at her, a strange expression of pity, or perhaps anticipation, on his face. "Is there a problem, Ms. Sterling?" Arthur asked, checking his Rolex. "Isabella is waiting for me. We have a flight to the Maldives to catch. I'd hate to miss it because you forgot how to write your name." Samantha took a deep breath. She signed, Samantha Miller. She dropped the name Sterling as fast as she could. "There," she said, pushing the papers away as if they burned her. "It's done. I'm leaving." Samantha grabbed her purse and stood up to leave. She wanted to get out of there before she broke down. The past year had been hell. While Arthur was out closing deals, which usually meant closing down bars with Isabella, Samantha had been the one at Harrison's bedside. She was the one who changed the old man's IVs, read him the newspaper, and wiped his brow when the fever took him. Arthur had visited maybe twice in 6 months, and only to ask about the will. "Not so fast, Miss Miller," Arthur called out, laughing. "Don't you want to wish me luck?" "Sit down, Miss Miller." Judge Halloway's voice boomed suddenly, cutting through Arthur's laughter like a knife. It wasn't a request. It was a command. Samantha froze. "Your Honor." "I said, sit down," Halloway repeated. He wasn't looking at the divorce papers anymore. He had opened a drawer in his bench and pulled out a thick manila envelope sealed with red wax. Arthur frowned, the smirk faltering for a fraction of a second. "Your Honor, the proceedings are concluded. My client has a plane to catch," Richard Thorne interjected, sensing a shift in the atmosphere. "Your client," Judge Halloway said, his eyes locking onto Arthur with a steely intensity, "is going nowhere until I execute the final request of the deceased Harrison Sterling." Arthur scoffed. "My father? What does this have to do with my divorce? The will is being probated by the firm of Davis & Lee. This is family court. This," Halloway held up the envelope, "is a testamentary caveat. A legal instrument your father entrusted to me personally, to be opened only after the dissolution of your marriage was signed, but before the divorce decree was stamped by the court." The room went deadly silent. The air conditioner hummed, sounding like a roar in the quiet. Arthur's smirk was gone now, replaced by a furrowed brow of confusion. "I don't understand," Arthur said, his voice losing its smooth edge. "You don't have to understand, Arthur," Halloway said, breaking the wax seal with a loud crack. "You just have to listen." Judge Halloway took his time. He pulled a pair of reading glasses from his breast pocket, cleaned them slowly with a handkerchief, and placed them on his nose. He unfolded the document, the parchment crinkling under the microphone. Samantha sat back down slowly, her heart pounding. She looked at the judge, then at Arthur. For the first time in years, Arthur looked genuinely unsettled. He was gripping the armrests of his chair so tightly, his knuckles were white. "This document," Judge Halloway began, his voice projecting clearly through the courtroom, was drafted and notarized inside Harrison Sterling's hospice room 3 days before his death. Witnesses were myself and the chief of medicine at St. Luke's Hospital. 3 days, Arthur blurted out. That's impossible. My father was delirious. He couldn't draft a legal document. I'll contest this. You will be silent. Halloway slammed his hand on the bench. Your father was lucid, Mr. Sterling. In fact, his mind was sharper than it had been in months. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he knew exactly what you were doing. Arthur's mouth snapped shut. Richard Thorne whispered frantically in his ear, probably telling him to keep quiet before he was held in contempt. I will read the statement from Harrison Sterling now, the judge said. He looked down at the paper and began to read. To my son Arthur, if you are hearing this, it means you have successfully divorced Samantha. It means you have prioritized your greed and your lust over the only woman who ever truly loved you or me. It means you sat across from her and forced her to sign away her dignity while you gloated about your victory. Samantha gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. Tears welled up in her eyes. Harrison had seen. He had known. The judge continued, his voice steady. You believe, Arthur, that you have been clever. You waited until I was in the ground to finalize the divorce so that the inheritance would be yours alone, classified as separate property, untouchable by Samantha. You assumed that because I was dying I wasn't paying attention. You were wrong. Arthur's face was turning a shade of crimson. This is ridiculous, he hissed. It's a lecture from the grave. Can we go? Read the next clause, Your Honor. Richard Thorne said, his voice tight. Let's get to the legal standing. Judge Halloway looked over his glasses at Arthur. Patience, Arthur. We are getting to the twist, as you might call it. Halloway cleared his throat and resumed reading. I, Harrison Sterling, being of sound mind, hereby revoke all previous wills and testaments held by Davis and Lee, regarding the distribution of my estate valued at approximately $82 million, including the Sterling Family Trust, the Lake Forest Estate, and all liquid assets. I hereby enact the character clause. The character clause, Arthur whispered. What the hell is that? The entirety of my estate, the judge read, emphasizing every word, is conditional. I have left the bulk of my fortune to the person who stood by me when I was weak, the person who washed my face, who held my hand, and who never asked for a penny, my daughter-in-law, Samantha Miller. The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavy, suffocating. Arthur blinked. Once. Twice. He let out a dry, incredulous laugh. That's a joke. He can't do that. I'm his son. I'm his only blood relative. Let me finish, Halloway said, cutting him off. However, the judge read, I know my son. I know he will try to fight this. So I have added a stipulation. If Arthur and Samantha are still happily married at the time of my death, the estate is split 50-50. But if Arthur initiates divorce proceedings, or if the divorce is signed within 30 days of my death, the following distribution applies. Halloway paused, looking directly at Arthur. To my son Arthur, I leave the sum of $1. This is to ensure you cannot claim you were forgotten. I also leave you my old toolbox located in the garage. Perhaps if you learn to work for a living, you will understand the value of $1. To Samantha Miller, provided she has signed the divorce papers under duress or unfair terms as witnessed by my executor, I leave the remainder of the estate. 100%. No, Arthur shouted, jumping to his feet. His chair flew back and hit the wall with a loud clatter. That's insanity. Undue influence, He pointed a shaking finger at Samantha. She poisoned him against me. She manipulated a dying old man. Sit down, Mr. Sterling. The bailiff took a step forward, hand resting on his belt. I won't sit down. This is fraud. Arthur was screaming now, the veins in his neck bulging. The cool, arrogant businessman was gone. In his place was a desperate, angry child. She gets nothing. I signed the prenup. The divorce papers. The divorce papers, Judge Halloway interrupted calmly, are signed. You signed them, Arthur. You smirked while you did it. By signing them, you activated the condition of the will. You legally severed your ties to Samantha, and in doing so, you severed your ties to the fortune. Halloway picked up the divorce decree Arthur had just signed. The court acknowledges the dissolution of the marriage. Samantha Miller is now a single woman. And as per the probate documents filed with this court this morning, she is also the sole beneficiary of the Sterling estate. Arthur looked at the papers on the table. The ink he had stared at so proudly just minutes ago now looked like a death sentence. He had signed his own disinheritance. He turned to his lawyer. Richard, do something, fix this. Richard Thorne was slowly packing his briefcase. He didn't look at Arthur. The will seems watertight, Arthur. Harrison used the in terrorem clause. If you contest it, you lose even the $1. And frankly, my retainer was based on the expectation of your inheritance. Richard clicked his briefcase shut. We'll need to discuss how you plan to pay my outstanding bill for today. I don't accept toolboxes. Arthur stood alone in the center of the courtroom. He looked at Samantha. Samantha was still sitting stunned. She hadn't moved. She looked up at the judge, then at Arthur. The shock was fading, replaced by a slow realization. Harrison hadn't just left her money. He had given her freedom. He had given her justice. She stood up slowly. She picked up her cheap purse. She looked at Arthur, who was breathing heavily, his face pale, his eyes wide with panic. Arthur, she said softly. He looked at her, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Sam, listen. We can fix this. We can tear up the papers. The judge hasn't stamped them yet. We can... No, Samantha said. Her voice was stronger now. You wanted this. You wanted to be free of me. You wanted to go to the Maldives with Isabella. She walked past him, heading toward the heavy wooden doors of the courtroom. Sam, wait, baby, please. Arthur lunged toward her, but the bailiff stepped in his way. Samantha paused at the door. She didn't look back. Enjoy the toolbox, Arthur. Your father always said you needed to fix a few things about yourself. She pushed the doors open and walked out into the hallway, leaving Arthur Sterling screaming in a room that suddenly felt very, very small. But the story didn't end there. Arthur Sterling was not a man who gave up easily, and $80 million was enough money to make people do dangerous things. As Samantha stepped into the elevator, she didn't know that Arthur was already formulating a plan, one that didn't involve lawyers, but rather people who operated in the shadows. The will had been read, but the war had just begun. Samantha walked out of the courthouse and into the blinding midday sun of Chicago. The city noise horns honking the rumble of the L train. The chatter of pedestrians felt distant, like she was hearing it underwater. She clutched the manila envelope containing her copy of the will to her chest, as if it were a life preserver in a stormy sea. She didn't feel rich. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt nauseous. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the confrontation with Arthur was draining away, leaving her knees weak. She sat on a concrete bench near the fountain, taking deep, shaky breaths. $82 million. It was a number that didn't make sense. For the last 10 years, she had to ask Arthur for grocery money. She had to produce receipts for every purchase over $50. She had been a prisoner in a gilded cage, and now suddenly she owned the cage and everything in it. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from her sister Jessica. "Are you okay? Did he sign it? Are you free?" Samantha typed back, her fingers trembling. "He signed. It's over. But you need to come pick me up. Something happened. Something big." While Samantha was trying to steady her breathing, Arthur Sterling was hyperventilating in the underground parking garage. He sat in his silver Porsche 911, the engine idling. He had been sitting there for 20 minutes, staring at the concrete wall. He had tried to call Richard Thorne 5 times. Each time it went straight to voicemail. The lawyer, sensing the sinking ship, had already cut communications. "Damn it!" Arthur screamed, slamming his fists against the steering wheel until the horn blared, echoing through the garage. He needed a plan. He needed cash. He needed to get to the bank before the probate court froze the accounts. Judge Holloway had said the paperwork was filed this morning, but surely there was a lag time. Banks were bureaucratic dinosaurs. They moved slowly. If he could get to the main branch of Chase on Dearborn Street, he could transfer the operating capital from his business account, about $200,000, into an offshore shell account he kept for rainy days. He threw the car into reverse tires, screeching, and sped out of the garage. He drove aggressively, weaving through traffic, ignoring red lights. He pulled up to the bank, leaving the Porsche in a loading zone. He marched inside, straightening his tie, trying to summon the aura of the powerful CEO he was yesterday. He approached the teller, a young woman named Sarah, who knew him well. "Mr. Sterling." She smiled, though it looked a bit strained. "How can I help you? I need to make a wire transfer." Arthur said, his voice clipped. "International. 200,000. Immediate authorization." Sarah typed on her keyboard. She frowned. She typed again. "I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The system is flagging the account." "Flagging it? For what?" "It's my company account. It says, deceased estate, probate hold. The executor has placed a freeze on all assets connected to the Sterling Family Trust and its subsidiaries." Arthur felt the blood drain from his face. "That's a mistake. That's my business account. It's separate from my father's estate." "The account is under the umbrella of Sterling Holdings, sir," Sarah said apologetically. "Harrison Sterling was the primary signatory. You were the secondary. With his passing and the alert we received 10 minutes ago from the court." 10 minutes, Arthur whispered. He was 10 minutes too late. "Is there anything else? My personal checking?" Arthur asked, desperation creeping into his voice. Sarah checked. "You have a balance of $4,300. However, there is a pending transaction from the Diamond Vault for $12,000 that was attempted an hour ago. It was declined." The bracelet. He had ordered a diamond tennis bracelet for Isabella as a celebration gift. Arthur turned around and walked out of the bank without saying another word. He felt dizzy. He had $4,000 to his name. The lease on his penthouse apartment in the city was due next week, $6,000 a month. The payments on the Porsche were $2,000. He was insolvent. He got back into his car, and his phone rang. The screen flashed "My Goddess, Isabella." He took a deep breath. He had to play this cool. If Isabella knew he was broke, she would be gone faster than the money. He needed her. He needed her connections, her support, maybe even a loan, until he could sue Samantha and get his money back. "Hey, baby," Arthur answered, forcing a cheerful tone. "I'm just leaving the bank, dealing with some boring paperwork for the inheritance." "Arthur." Isabella's voice was cold. Ice cold. "Where are you?" "I'm coming to pick you up. We have that flight to the Maldives at 6, remember?" "Don't bother," she said. "What? What do you mean?" "I saw the news, Arthur. TMZ picked it up. Billionaire real estate tycoon leaves everything to estranged wife in shocking twist. You're trending on Twitter, #TheToolboxAir." Arthur closed his eyes. "Bella, listen to me. It's a legal hiccup. I'm going to fight it. I'll win. It's just a matter of time." "I don't have time," Isabella snapped. "And I certainly don't have time for a 40-year-old man who lives out of a toolbox. You promised me a lifestyle, Arthur. You promised me the sterling fortune. If you don't have it, we don't have us. You greedy little—" "Save it," she cut him off. "I cancelled the tickets, and Arthur, do not come to my apartment. The concierge has been instructed to call the police if you set foot in the lobby. Goodbye." The line went dead. Arthur stared at the phone. He threw it into the passenger seat. He was alone. No wife, no mistress, no lawyer, no money. But as the shock wore off, a dark, cold rage began to fill the void. He looked at the passenger seat where the phone lay. Underneath the seat, he saw the edge of the rusty red metal box he had thrown there earlier, the toolbox the bailiff had handed him on the way out of the courtroom. He reached down and dragged it up. It was heavy, covered in grease and scratches. A Craftsman box from the 1980s. "You think this is funny, Dad?" Arthur hissed at the box. "You think you taught me a lesson?" He didn't open it. He didn't want to see the wrenches and hammers that represented the manual labor his father had always idolized and Arthur had always despised. "I'm not done," Arthur muttered, gripping the steering wheel. "Samantha thinks she's won. She has no idea who she's dealing with." He started the car. He wasn't going to the Maldives. He was going to Lake Forest. He was going to the family estate. Legally, it might be hers. But possession was 9/10 of the law, and he wasn't leaving that house without a fight. The Sterling estate in Lake Forest was a sprawling mansion set on 5 acres of manicured gardens, hidden from the road by high brick walls and wrought iron gates. It was the house Arthur had grown up, in the house he had kicked Samantha out of 6 months ago. It was late afternoon by the time Samantha arrived. She was in the passenger seat of her sister Jessica's beaten-up Ford Explorer. Jessica, a fiery redhead with a no-nonsense attitude, was driving with one hand and holding a cigarette out the window with the other. "I still can't believe it," Jessica said, shaking her head. "Old man Harrison actually did it. I always thought he was a grump, but turns out he was a genius." "He was just sad," Samantha said softly, looking out the window at the passing trees. "He missed his wife. He hated what Arthur had become. He told me once that money was like salt water. The more you drink, the thirstier you get. He watched Arthur drowning and couldn't save him." "Well, Arthur is about to drown for real," Jessica said, turning the car onto the private drive leading to the estate. "So what's the plan?" "We go in, change the locks, and pop some champagne." "I just want to get my things," Samantha said. "My grandmother's quilt, my photo albums." "Arthur locked them in the guest room and wouldn't let me take them when I left. I don't care about the rest yet." They pulled up to the massive iron gates. Usually they were closed, requiring a code. Today they were standing wide open. "That's not right," Samantha frowned. The security system should be auto-locked. Jessica slowed the car. Maybe the staff left them open. Arthur fired the staff last week to save money before the inheritance came in, Samantha said. The house should be empty. They drove up the long driveway. As the house came into view, Samantha gasped. Arthur's silver Porsche was parked on the front lawn, not the driveway, the lawn leaving deep tire tracks in the pristine grass. The front door of the mansion was wide open. "He's here," Samantha whispered, fear clutching her throat. "Let him be here," Jessica said, unbuckling her seatbelt aggressively. "It's your house now, Sam. You have the papers." "Jessica, no. He's dangerous when he's angry. We should call the police and wait 20 minutes while he trashes the place." Jessica opened her door. "I'm not scared of Arthur Sterling." Samantha scrambled out of the car, clutching her phone. She followed Jessica up the stone steps. The inside of the house was quiet. Too quiet. "Arthur!" Jessica yelled, her voice echoing in the grand foyer. "Get your ass out here!" A crash came from the library down the hall, the sound of glass shattering. Samantha ran toward the sound, Jessica close behind. They stopped at the doorway of the library. The room was a wreck. Books were pulled off the shelves. The antique globe was smashed on the floor. And there, standing by the fireplace, was Arthur. He was holding a fire poker in one hand and a bottle of expensive scotch in the other. He looked disheveled, his tie undone, his eyes wild and bloodshot. He turned and saw them. A twisted smile spread across his face. "Welcome home, wifey," he slurred. "I was just redecorating." "Get out, Arthur," Samantha said, trying to keep her voice steady, though her legs were shaking. "The house is mine. You know it is." "Yours." Arthur laughed, a harsh barking sound. He swung the fire poker, smashing a lamp on the desk. "You think because a senile old man signed a piece of paper you own this? I grew up here. I built the Sterling name while he sat around rotting." "You didn't build anything," Samantha shouted, finding a sudden surge of courage. "You spent it. You stole from the company accounts, Harrison told me. He knew about the skimming Arthur. He knew about the fake contractors." Arthur froze. The color drained from his flushed face. He told you that. Why do you think he left you the toolbox?" Samantha stepped forward. "He said he wanted you to learn to build something real, but he also wanted you to stop destroying everything he built." Arthur's eyes narrowed. "If he told you that, then you're a liability, Sam." He took a step toward her, raising the fire poker. Jessica lunged forward, grabbing a heavy brass statue from a side table. "Don't you dare, you psycho! I have 911 on the line right now." She held up her phone, the screen glowing. Arthur hesitated. He looked at Jessica, then at Samantha. He looked at the chaos he had created. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that he had truly lost. Violence would only send him to prison, and in prison he couldn't get his money back. He lowered the poker. He took a swig of the scotch and threw the bottle into the fireplace where it shattered against the bricks. "Fine," Arthur spat. "Have it. Have the house. Have the ghosts. It's all rotting anyway." He stormed past them, bumping Samantha's shoulder hard as he went. He marched out the front door. Samantha let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She slumped against the doorframe. "He's gone." "For now," Jessica said, lowering the statue. "We need to change those locks. Tonight." Outside, Arthur got into his Porsche. He saw the rusty toolbox sitting on the passenger seat. He grabbed it to throw it out the window, to leave it on the lawn as a final insult. But he stopped. Something Samantha had said triggered a memory. The fake contractors. Arthur looked at the toolbox. It was his father's old box from the 70s, back when Harrison was a general contractor. Arthur opened the latches. Click, click. He lifted the heavy lid. Inside, there was a standard tray of tools, a hammer, screwdrivers, a wrench set. Nothing special. Garbage, Arthur muttered. He lifted the top tray to dump it out. Underneath the tray in the bottom compartment there was nothing. Just empty, oily metal. Arthur screamed in frustration and hurled the tray into the back seat. He went to throw the metal box out the door, but as he gripped the bottom, his fingers felt something. The bottom of the box felt too thick. He paused. He tapped the metal floor of the box. It didn't ring hollow. It was solid. Arthur pulled a pocket knife from his pants. He jammed it into the seam at the bottom of the box and pried. The false bottom popped up with a screech of metal. Arthur's heart stopped. Lying in the hidden compartment wasn't money. It wasn't gold. It was a stack of cassette tapes and a leather-bound ledger. Arthur picked up the ledger. He opened it. It was in his father's handwriting dating back 30 years. Project Bluebird. City Inspector payoff $50,000. Date 1992. Northside Development. Union bribe $20,000. Date 1995. Judge Halloway. Campaign donation off books $100,000. Date 1998. Arthur's eyes went wide. His father hadn't just been a hard-working contractor. Harrison Sterling had built his empire on bribery, corruption, and backroom deals, and he had kept the receipts. But the most interesting entry was the last one, dated just 2 years ago. Cleanup. The structural failure at the West End Tower. Engineer report. Suppression. Paid to Frank Russo. Arthur started to laugh. It was a low, menacing chuckle that built into a roar. Harrison had left him the toolbox to teach him a lesson about hard work. But the old man had inadvertently handed Arthur the nuclear codes. This ledger didn't just incriminate his dead father, it implicated half the city council, the zoning board, and Judge Lawrence Halloway, the same judge who had just humiliated Arthur in court. "You wanted me to work, Dad," Arthur whispered, stroking the leather book. "I'm going to work. I'm going to burn them all down." He put the car in gear. He wasn't broke anymore. He held the leverage to blackmail the most powerful people in Chicago, and he knew exactly who to call first. He needed to find Frank Russo. Arthur drove away from the mansion, leaving Samantha to her victory. She thought she had won the war. She didn't realize that by accepting the inheritance, she had also inherited the sins of the father, and Arthur was about to make her pay for them. Arthur Sterling sat in a booth at the back of the Rusty Anchor, a dive bar on the south side of Chicago that smelled of stale beer and regret. It was a place where men went to disappear, which made it the perfect place to find Frank Russo. Russo had been the chief structural engineer for Sterling Holdings for 15 years before being quietly let go with a massive severance package. He was a man who knew where the bodies were buried because he had poured the concrete over them. When Russo walked in, he looked like a ghost. Gaunt, shaking hands, yellowed eyes. He slid into the booth opposite Arthur, eyeing the glass of whiskey Arthur had already ordered for him. "I haven't seen you in years, Arthur," Russo rasped, downing the drink in one gulp. "Your old man kept me comfortable to stay away. With him dead, I figured the checks would stop." "The checks are definitely stopping, Frank," Arthur said, leaning forward, his voice low. "But your freedom might be stopping too. Arthur slid a photocopy of a single page from the ledger across the sticky table. Russo looked at it, and the little color left in his face vanished. West End Tower. Engineer report suppression. Paid to Frank Russo. "Where did you get this?" Russo whispered. "My father left me a toolbox." Arthur smirked, enjoying the power shift. He thought I'd use it to fix sinks. Instead, I'm using it to fix my life. "Tell me about the West End Tower, Frank." "The fire in 2021. The official report said it was faulty wiring." Russo looked around nervously. It wasn't wiring. It was the load-bearing columns on the 14th floor. "We used substandard steel to cut costs." Harrison knew. I told him the stress fractures were showing. 2 days later, a gas leak caused an explosion on that floor. It gutted the evidence. The 3 maintenance workers who died, they didn't die from smoke. They were crushed before the fire even started. Arthur sat back, a cold thrill running down his spine. This was better than he imagined. It wasn't just negligence. It was manslaughter. And the cover-up involved the fire inspector, the zoning board, and the coroner. "Who signed off on the final inquiry?" Arthur asked. "Judge Holloway," Russo said. "Before he was a judge, he was the district attorney. He killed the investigation." Arthur smiled. "Thank you, Frank. You've been very helpful." "What are you going to do?" Russo asked, terrified. "I'm going to get my money back." Arthur left a $100 bill on the table and walked out. He drove his Porsche, now feeling like a tank, straight to the affluent suburb of Oak Park. He pulled up to a modest, dignified brick house with a manicured lawn, the home of the Honorable Judge Lawrence P. Holloway. It was 9:00 p.m. Arthur rang the doorbell. Holloway opened the door wearing a smoking jacket, looking every bit the respectable pillar of the community. When he saw Arthur, his face hardened. "Mr. Sterling, if you are here to harass me about the probate ruling, I will have you arrested for trespassing." "Assing. I'm not here about the will, Lawrence," Arthur said, using the judge's first name with deliberate disrespect. "I'm here about the West End Tower." Holloway froze. The door, which he was about to close, remained open. "May I come in?" Arthur asked politely. Holloway stepped aside wordlessly. They went into the study, the same room where Holloway likely drafted his moralizing speeches. Arthur didn't sit. He stood by the fireplace, pulling the black ledger from his jacket. "You gave a very moving performance in court today, Judge," Arthur began, "lecturing me about character, about greed. It was touching. But I'm curious. How much did my father pay you to look the other way, when 3 men were crushed to death in 2021? Holloway sank into his leather chair. He looked suddenly very old. "Arthur, you don't understand. It was a different time. Your father, he was a forceful man." "I don't care about the past," Arthur snapped. "I care about my future. Specifically the $82 million you just handed to my ex-wife." "I can't change the will," Holloway stammered. "It's a legal document. It's done. You're a judge. You can do anything," Arthur said, opening the ledger to the page marked 1998. "You can issue an emergency injunction. You can claim there was a procedural error. You can claim Samantha exercised undue influence on a dying man and freeze the assets pending a criminal investigation. You can tie this up in court for 10 years until she starves. That's unethical. It's illegal." Arthur tossed the ledger onto the judge's lap. "And this legal? Because if I don't see an injunction freezing Samantha's accounts by tomorrow morning, I'm taking this book to the FBI. I'll go to prison for my part in the company, sure. But you'll die in federal prison, Lawrence. You'll be the disgraced judge who took blood money." Halloway stared at the book. His hands were shaking. He looked up at Arthur, hate burning in his eyes. "You really are your father's son," Halloway whispered. "No," Arthur corrected him, buttoning his jacket. "My father had a conscience. That's why he kept the book. I don't have one. That's why I'm going to win." Arthur walked to the door. "Tomorrow morning, Judge, 9:00 a.m., or the book goes public." Arthur whistled as he walked back to his car. He had done it. He had played the trump card. But he wasn't done yet. Samantha had embarrassed him. She had pitied him. And for that, she had to pay. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. It was a contact saved simply as Cleaner. "Yeah," a gritty voice answered. "It's Sterling," Arthur said. "I have a job. I need you to plant something in a house in Lake Forest, and then I need you to make an anonymous tip to the police." "What are we planting?" "Drugs," Arthur said coldly. "A lot of them. Enough to make sure she doesn't just lose the money. I want her to lose her freedom." Samantha Sterling woke up in the master bedroom of the Sterling Manor. The morning sun was streaming through the silk curtains, but the house felt cold. It was too big for one person. Jessica had left early to take her kids to school, promising to return later with boxes. Samantha was alone. She wandered down the grand staircase, her footsteps echoing on the marble. She made herself coffee in the cavernous kitchen that had never seen a home-cooked meal in decades. She felt like an intruder in her own life. She decided to go to Harrison's study. It was the one room she had avoided yesterday. It was the heart of the house, the place where the empire was run. The study was dark, smelling of tobacco and old leather. Samantha walked to the massive oak desk. It was cluttered with papers, but in the center there was a single clean white envelope. It had her name on it. Samantha. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. She recognized Harrison's shaky handwriting. She opened it. "My dearest Samantha, if you are reading this, the storm has passed and you are the owner of everything I built. I am sorry for the burden this places on you. Money is heavy, my dear. It changes people. But I must warn you, I did not leave Arthur the toolbox just to mock him. I left it because it was a test. Inside that box is a false bottom. It contains the records of my sins. If Arthur is the man I fear he has become, he will find it. And if he finds it, he will use it. He will come for you, Samantha. He will not accept defeat. He believes he is entitled to the world. There is a safe behind the painting of the hunt in the library. The combination is the date we first met, the day you brought me that terrible gelatin mold when I broke my hip. Inside, you will find the only thing that can stop him if he goes too far. Use it only if you must. Protect yourself. You were the daughter I never had. Love, Harrison." Samantha dropped the letter. A chill went through her. The toolbox. She remembered Arthur sitting in the driveway yesterday. She remembered the rage in his eyes. She remembered him taking the red metal box. "Oh, God," she whispered. Suddenly, the front door burst open. Heavy boots thundered in the hallway. "Police search warrant." Samantha spun around, dropping her coffee mug. It shattered on the floor, brown liquid splashing onto the Persian rug. 3 uniformed officers and 2 detectives in cheap suits stormed into the study. "Samantha Sterling," the lead detective barked. He was a thick-set man with a mustache that didn't hide his sneer. I'm Detective Miller. We have a warrant to search the premises for illicit narcotics and stolen corporate property. Narcotics? Samantha gasped. You have to be joking. I've never... Save it for the station, Miller said. Check the library, he ordered his men. Samantha watched in horror as they tore through the room. It took them less than 3 minutes. One of the officers found a taped brick of white powder taped under the underside of a velvet armchair. Look at this, the officer said, holding up the bag. Looks like a kilo of cocaine detective. I've never seen that before, Samantha screamed. This is a setup. Arthur did this. Detective Miller ignored her. Cuff her. No, please. Samantha struggled as the officer grabbed her wrists, twisting them behind her back. The cold metal of the handcuffs bit into her skin. As they marched her out of the house, a silver Porsche pulled up the driveway. Arthur Sterling stepped out. He was wearing a fresh suit, sunglasses, and a smile that could cut glass. He leaned against the hood of his car, watching Samantha being dragged toward the squad car. Arthur, Samantha yelled. You did this. You planted it. Arthur took off his sunglasses. He looked at the detective. Sad, he said, shaking his head. I knew she had a problem, officer. That's why I had to divorce her. I tried to get her help, but the addiction, it destroys families. You monster, Samantha cried, tears streaming down her face. Don't worry, Sam, Arthur called out as they shoved her into the back of the police car. I'll look after the house while you're away. I'll make sure everything is taken care of. The police car pulled away. Arthur watched it go, a look of pure satisfaction on his face. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Judge Halloway. Injunction granted. Assets frozen pending criminal investigation. The estate is in limbo. You have temporary conservatorship as the next of kin. Arthur laughed. He walked up the steps of the manor. He was back. He had the money. He had the house. And Samantha was going to prison for a long, long time. He walked into the foyer, kicking the door shut behind him. He felt invincible. But he had made one mistake. He hadn't checked the library painting. In the chaos of the raid, the police hadn't looked behind the painting of the fox hunt. They had found the drugs Arthur planted and stopped looking. And Arthur didn't know about the safe. Meanwhile, at the precinct, Samantha was being processed, fingerprinted, mugshot, stripped of her jewelry. She was placed in a holding cell that smelled of urine and bleach. She sat on the metal bench, her head in her hands. She felt broken. Arthur had won. He was too smart, too cruel. Samantha Sterling. She looked up. A man was standing on the other side of the bars. He was wearing a sharp navy suit, holding a briefcase. He looked familiar. It was Richard Thorne, Arthur's lawyer. What do you want? Samantha spat. Did he send you to gloat? No. Thorne said, his voice smooth. He didn't send me. In fact, he hasn't paid my bill in 3 months. And if there is one thing I hate more than losing a case, Miss Sterling, it is a client who doesn't pay. Thorne signaled the guard to open the cell. I saw the news, Thorne said, stepping inside. Arthur is playing a dangerous game, blackmailing judges, planting evidence. He's sloppy. He seems pretty effective to me, Samantha said bitterly. He's arrogant, Thorne corrected. He thinks he's the only one who knows the law. But I know where Arthur hides his skeletons. I represented him for 10 years. Thorne sat down next to her. I can get you out on bail within the hour. The search warrant was flimsy, and the anonymous tip can be traced if you know who to ask. But if we are going to take him down, we need to do it permanently. Why would you help me? Because you have $80 million. Thorne smiled a shark-like grin that was surprisingly comforting. And because Arthur called me a glorified paralegal yesterday, I have a professional reputation to uphold." Samantha looked at him. She thought about Harrison's letter. Use it only if you must. "Get me out of here," Samantha said, her eyes hardening. "I need to get back to the house. There's something in the library I need to find." "The police sealed the house," Thorne said. "Arthur is legally in possession as the conservator." "Then we have to break in," Samantha said. Thorne raised an eyebrow. "Breaking and entering." "That's illegal, Ms. Sterling." "It's not breaking and entering if it's my house," Samantha said. "And besides, Arthur thinks the war is over. He thinks I'm helpless." She stood up, wiping the tears from her face. "He's about to find out that he didn't just inherit a toolbox," Samantha said. "He inherited a wrecking ball." Arthur Sterling sat in his father's leather chair, swirling a glass of 50-year-old Macallan. The house was silent, save for the crackling fire. He had won. Samantha was in a cell, the judge was in his pocket, and the $80 million estate was effectively his again. He raised his glass to the empty room. "To the victor," he whispered. The lights suddenly flickered and died. The room plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the dying embers of the fireplace. "What the hell?" Arthur grumbled, standing up. The heavy oak doors of the study creaked open. A silhouette stood in the doorway, backlit by a flashlight. "Who's there?" Arthur demanded, reaching for the fire poker, his weapon of choice lately. "Put it down, Arthur," a voice said. It was calm, icy, and female. The beam of the flashlight swung up, revealing Samantha's face. She wasn't crying anymore. She looked fierce. Behind her stood Richard Thorne and two men in windbreakers, stamped with 3 letters FBI. "Samantha." Arthur laughed nervously, though his grip on the poker tightened. "How did you get out? And bringing the feds. You really are desperate. I have the judge, remember. I have the leverage." "You have a book, Arthur," Samantha said, stepping into the room. "A book your father left you as bait." "Bait," Arthur scoffed. "It's evidence. It proves the old man was a crook. It proves Holloway was corrupt." "It proves Harrison was corrupt," Samantha corrected. "But it didn't prove you were." She walked past him, ignoring the weapon in his hand, and went straight to the painting of the fox hunt on the far wall. She reached behind the frame, her fingers finding the hidden latch. The painting swung forward, revealing a heavy steel safe. Arthur froze. "I didn't know that was there." "Harrison knew you wouldn't look," she said. She turned the dial. Left to 10. Right to 14. Left to 20. The date they met. The safe clicked open. Inside there was no money, just a single digital voice recorder and a stack of files. Samantha picked up the recorder and pressed play. Harrison's voice filled the room, raspy but clear. "Arthur, if Samantha is playing this, it means you used the ledger to blackmail Judge Holloway. You took the easy way out, just like I knew you would." Arthur's face went pale. "But the ledger only tells half the story." The recording continued. "It shows the bribes I paid. But this tape, this is the recording of the meeting in 2021, the meeting where I begged you not to use the cheap steel for the West End Tower. The meeting where you told me that safety is a luxury we can't afford, and signed the order yourself." Arthur lunged for the recorder. "Give me that." The 2 FBI agents tackled him before he could take 2 steps. Arthur hit the floor hard, the wind knocked out of him. "Arthur Sterling," one of the agents said, hauling him up and slapping handcuffs on his wrists. "You are under arrest for corporate manslaughter, racketeering, and extortion." "You can't do this," Arthur screamed, struggling against the cuffs. "Thorne, do something." Richard Thorne stepped forward, checking his watch. I am doing something, Arthur. I'm representing Ms. Sterling now, and I'm advising you to remain silent, though we both know you never could keep your mouth shut. Samantha walked up to Arthur. She held the recorder in her hand, the final nail in his coffin. You smirked when you signed the divorce papers, Arthur, she said softly. You smirked when you planted the drugs, but you forgot one thing. What? Arthur spat, his eyes wild with fear. Your father didn't leave you the toolbox because he hated you, she said. He left it to you because he knew eventually you'd try to dismantle everything. He just wanted to make sure I had the tools to build it back up. As the agents dragged Arthur out of the mansion, screaming obscenities into the night, Samantha stood in the center of the study. She looked at Thorne, who gave her a respectful nod. She looked around the room. The oppressive weight of the house was gone. The ghosts had been exorcised. She walked to the desk and picked up the phone. Who are you calling? Thorne asked. The press. No. Samantha said, a small smile touching her lips. I'm calling the staff. I think it's time to give everyone their jobs back. And then I'm going to redecorate. In the end, Arthur Sterling got exactly what he deserved. He traded a life of luxury for a 10-year sentence in a federal penitentiary. The toolbox heir became a cautionary tale in Chicago high society. Samantha Sterling used the inheritance not for yachts or private jets, but to set up a foundation for families affected by construction negligence, starting with the victims of the West End Tower. She proved that while money can reveal a person's character, it is integrity that defines their legacy. Harrison Sterling's final gamble had paid off. The empire was finally in safe hands. Did this story keep you on the edge of your seat? If you enjoyed seeing justice served and the arrogant billionaire get taken down, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who loves a good drama, and subscribe for more twisted tales of betrayal and revenge. Let me know in the comments. Would you have opened the safe? Thanks for watching.